Trinity, Speech and Drama, Grade 7. I'm Aryan. First, I shall be performing my speech titled The Apology by Socrates, translated to English by MIT.
How you have felt, O men of Athens, at hearing the speeches of my accusers, I cannot tell. But I know that their persuasive words almost made me forget who I was. Such was the effect of them. And yet, they've hardly spoken a word of truth. But many as their falsehoods were, there was one of them which quite amazed me. I mean, when they told you to be upon your guard and not let yourself be deceived by the force of my eloquence. They ought to have been ashamed of saying this, for they were sure to be detected as soon as I opened my lips and displayed my deficiency. They certainly did appear most shameless in saying this. Unless by the force of eloquence, they mean the force of truth. For then I do indeed admit I am eloquent. But in how different of a way than theirs? Well, anyways, as I was saying, they've hardly uttered a word, not more than a word of truth. But you shall hear from me the whole truth. Not, however, delivered after their manner in a set oration, duly ornamented with words and phrases. No, indeed. But I shall use the words and arguments that occur to me at the moment. For I am certain that this is right. And at my time of life, I ought not to be appearing before you, O men of Athens, in the character of a juvenile orator. Let no one expect this of me.
Thank you. Next, I shall be performing my poem titled Impossible by Harry Baker.
The truth is, it's too easy to tell ourselves it's too hard when facing the end that it's too late to even make a start. But if we take impossible to mean that we don't stand a chance, we've lost sight of how unlikely it was that we would get this far. The way a single fish outwits the shark by sticking with its school. The way a crescent moon outspins its dark to once again be full. Even winter, given long enough, begins to lose its cool. What was once exceptional, now barely registers at all. The bug, who finds it all too much and shuts off everything, to then recover and, if summoned up, the strength to stretch its wings. The snake, so full of itself, it cannot help but shed its skin. Or how, instead of death, the hedgehog went to bed and slept till spring.
The fact that the earth existed this specific distance from the sun, down to the angle of axis on which everything is spun, the fact that trees happen to breathe, that which we need inside our lungs, it would all seem impossible had it not already been done. We are so constantly surrounded that it's easy to forget. The world is full of impossible that hasn't stopped us yet. Just as indeed the do's we did outdo the don'ts we didn't. So everything's impossible until it isn't. Flamingos and giraffes look like they were drawn by a child. We can't begin to comprehend all of the ways in which this world is wild. None of them asked if they were possible before they came to be. None of them have ceased to exist by being told they make believe. The thought of rivers changing course before somebody gave a damn. That a tide might turn from shore before lines drawn in the sand. We cannot know how far our actions go, the impact they might have. Sometimes, the only thing we can do is to do all we can. Just as the night is at its darkest when it's introduced to the day. Just as the dry is at its harshest, a breath before it rains, it's easy enough to believe in something when everything's okay. It's when times are at their hardest that it's hardest to have faith, and yet the will that survives is the one we are feeding the most. By making it through day to day, we see the seasons evolve. If there was never any doubt, there'd be no reason to hope. It could be too late to do anything. It sure as hell is if we don't. When it's over, and we are no more than bones in the ground. Still, the soil knows to grow its seed from what it's broken down. What is lost is always lost until the moment it is found. It only ever goes one way unless we turn things around. I'm tired of the doom and gloom and self-fulfilling prophecies. I'm trying to find room to bloom and self-fulfill the opposites. When it's an act of revolution to try and stay remotely positive, there's nothing wishy-washy about opting to be optimists. We are all impossible to everyone who's been there before. And everybody who's gonna come is gonna push impossible some more, just as indeed the do's we did outdo the don'ts we didn't. So everything will remain impossible until it isn't. Thank you. Next, I shall be performing my play extract written by Anthony Chekhov. She loves me. She loves me not. not. She loves me. She loves me not. You see, my mother doesn't love me. Why should she? She wants to live, to love, to wear pretty frocks, and I'm 25 years old, and a perpetual reminder that she is no longer young. When I'm not there, she is only 32. When I am, she is 43. And she hates me for that. She also knows I don't believe in the stage. She loves the stage. She thinks that she is advancing the cause of humanity and her sacred art. But I regard the stage of today as mere routine and prejudice. And the curtain goes up, and the high priests, the gifted beings, the high priests of the sacred art, appear by electric light in a room with 3 sides to it, representing how people eat, drink, love, walk, wear their jackets. And they strive to squeeze out moral from the flat, vulgar pictures and the flat, vulgar phrases. A little tiny moral, easy to comprehend and handy for home consumption. When in 1,000 variations, they offer me always the same thing over and over again. Then I take to my heels and run, as Maupassant did from the Eiffel Tower, which crushed his brain by its overwhelming vulgarity. We must have a new formula. That's what we want. And if there are none, then it's better to have nothing at all. Thank you. Now I should be moving on to my 4th task, which is the realization of an unseen text. I should be discussing the poem Mariana by Lord Alfred Tennyson. So the first time I read this piece, I thought that it was about a girl who's waiting for her lover to elope, but she's lost hope in the lover for coming back, which is why she's feeling very helpless, and she's feeling as though she's trapped, she's a prisoner, and there's nothing better in her life than to be dead, because there's basically nothing left if not for love. Um, then, if we look at a couple of words and phrases that stood out on the first reading, definitely it stood out to me that there was only one dialogue and it repeated throughout all the stanzas, which was I'm a very, I wish that I were dead. And this kept repeating, and this was the only dialogue from the lady. Um, the second thing that stood out was that the mood was conveyed through phrases like rusting nails, blackest moss, crusty. Uh, so basically, all the mood was conveyed through the setting. These words were specifically used to describe this whole gloomy, dark setting. Even movement, such as the flitting black bats, also convey movement, but it's a very dark movement. So, those were a couple of words and phrases that stood out to me, specifically because they conveyed the mood of the poem, the settings of the poem, and those were probably the only things that we had to infer about the whole mood aside from that single dialogue of the girl. Now that we are discussing the style and mood, we noticed that there has been no setting up by dialogue, so there is no direct communication with the audience either. It's all very descriptive. There's a lot of imagery going on, and they're explaining how the setting looks like, how it's very gloomy, it's very dark, it's very depressing with the kind of words they've used. And I think this dark, depressing mood is what carries on throughout the whole poem till the extreme end. A couple of things that the poet did to engage the listener or the audience, aside from, of course, the ABAB rhyme scheme, we could see that the language that was being used in the dialogue was Old English. Now, I'm pretty sure this was written at a time when Old English wasn't common use, but these days we don't use words like a very. We're more in tune with words like very. So this definitely stands out to us, it catches our attention. There's a lot of dramatic tension with the way the stage is set, and you can also see that in the dialogues, the type of words that have been used, she wishes that she were dead. This is such an extreme word, there's so much emphasis that it carries a lot of weight, and it definitely impacts the reader quite a bit. If I had to talk about how I would perform this piece, there were two main things that I would consider. The first was definitely dimming the lights. It's a very dark scene, so it makes sense to have lesser lights. And the only light, or maybe like a spotlight, should only be focused on the girl when she says her lines. Aside from that, there should be very dim lighting just to showcase the kind of setting there is. Have a lot of black, have a lot of creepy stuff going around, have a lot of dark, depressing stuff. I feel like that would really bring the performance to life or to death. But that's one thing I would do. And the second thing is that while performing this poem, I would rather be crouched, lying down, sitting down, instead of standing up, because the kind of words, they convey a sense of helplessness, as though there is nothing you can do to help yourself, which is conveyed very there's a lot of symbolism going on with the kind of body posture you have, and if you're crouching, if you're lying down, it conveys that helplessness not only through the words but also through our body, and I feel that that will be very that could probably drive the message home and be very dramatic in nature. It would definitely build upon that. Coming on to my final task, the reflection. If you talk about the contrast in the writer's approach to communicating with the audience, there are two main differences I would like to focus on. The first is the audience they're talking to, and second is the time period they were written in. We could see that the speech, the apology, was written in ancient Greece. In comparison, the play extract was written somewhere around, I think, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s. Anton Chekhov wrote them in medieval times. In comparison, the poem was much more modern, so we could definitely see that coming in the way they talked. And the audience they were talking to. So the speech was addressed to a jury where Socrates was trying to prove he was innocent, but since he is also a wise old philosopher, his words carry that power. So even though the words were very simple, They were very persuasive, they were very powerful, and the way they were written were meant to be said in a commanding tone. Um, that was with the speech. Talking about the play extract, you could see that this is more of an internal monologue, so it made sense to talk to oneself in this case, and there was no conversation that was happening per se. It was a direct conversation with oneself while one was reflecting and probably trying to blame her mother for the way she was. And finally, the poem was meant to engage the audience. It was very engaging because all the communication happened directly with the audience. There was very direct reference to the audience, and we could clearly see that they were like, we can't know how far our actions will go, but the most we can do is to do all we can. Stuff like that. It takes everyone together. So there's this constant we, all of human race together, and there's this sense in this approach to communicating with the audience. Second, if you talk about the motivation of one of my characters in one of my pieces, so what choices did you make about the character's motivation in one of your performed pieces? So talking about my play extract, one very conscious decision I made was to look aside from the camera, maybe into a side, as there was like, as though I was talking to myself, and there was no one looking onto me. So I could reflect upon myself, I could think to myself that, why should she love me? She wants to wear pretty frocks, everything. And only and the motivation behind this is that he's in a misunderstood society where the character feels that he does not fit in, his work is not appreciated, and what is appreciated is very vulgar, very beneath his standards. So with this air of superiority where he feels he does not fit in, it made sense to be talking to oneself instead of an audience. So that was about my second piece. My third piece, what skills did I develop most in preparation for today? There were two main skills that I would like to focus on. The first one was obviously prop management, how you handle the props. My first performance had me wear a kind of toga, which was actually my curtain, and the curtain was difficult to manage in the sense you had to know when to maybe bang the curtain rod, whether the curtain was falling down, or how to improvise it, make it look very natural, and not as there was something out of the ordinary. So definitely prop management was one. Also in my last piece, picking up the props, I didn't straight away go and pick it up. There was a slight path to show some sort of puzzlement. So all of those were a couple of considerations I had to keep in mind. And the second thing was performance in different tones and modes. So for the poem, I was greatly struggling with how I should perform it. I started off by performing it in a very serious tone because that's how I heard the poem. I started off with, the truth is, it's too easy to tell ourselves, it's too hard. And I felt that there wasn't enough variation between all my pieces and really wasn't bringing out the message of the poem. So I tried experimenting with a couple of other tones. So I tried a little bit of curious. The truth is, it's too easy to tell ourselves, it's too hard. I tried experimenting with questioning, inquisitive words, and inquisitive tones. But in the end, I settled on this very cheerful, happy tone because I felt that it showed quite a stark contrast of all my pieces, and I was able to bring out that hopefulness. And generally, my bass tone is not a very happy tone, so it was definitely out of my comfort zone. But I tried practicing again and again, and I hope that I was able to bring it in to my performance finally, and I hope the skill was demonstrated well. Talking about my staging process, a couple of considerations for my staging process. I had to ensure that the stage was well lit. There are 3 lights, one to the left, 2 in front, to ensure that I am in complete focus. Second of all, I had to ensure there was a blank background, which involved a lot of moving around stuff. And I tried to keep it as blank as possible, so there were no distracting features. I had to mark where my frame ended so I could keep all my set just at the edge. I had to keep my script at the edge so as to not make it distracting. I kept moving the chair in and out. Especially for my second piece where there was not a lot else going on except me talking, I moved the chair out to not have it as a distraction in the stage. And talking about how I positioned everything, both my pieces, I kept the chair to the left, I started performing to the right. That's the audience I focused on, because I felt that this balanced the stage quite a bit, instead of talking like this, because that would have felt very one-sided. I kept my chair to the left, because that's usually the convention, it seems normal, and I tried practicing a little bit with the chair on the right, but that kept seeming awkward, that kept seeming odd, so that was one more staging consideration that I kept in mind. Also the positioning of the camera to ensure that there was enough height, so I fit in when I stand up, but also that there's enough space at the bottom for me to not be cut off. Hopefully I'm not cut off. The phone's tilted to the other side, so I'm not sure. So that's a little bit about my staging pieces. For my first piece, I imagined that my accusers were sitting right there and I was addressing the jury right here. And I continuously keep shifting my gaze left and right to ensure that I reached out to both the people. So that's the end of my examination. Thank you so much.